Concerned individuals and Nigeria's civil society movement have been emphasizing the importance of educating the public on the danger of vote buying with the next general election in less than 3 months. According to these stakeholders, the credibility of elections and by extension Nigeria's socio-economic and political stability will be solely dependent on protecting the alienable right of the electorate to make unfettered choice of candidates at the polling booths. Well, we are now being joined by the Executive Director, Jaeger Africa, Samson Itodo, and member of the Nigeria Civil Society Situation Room, Odi, to look at how best to check vote buying and the need for public enlightenment for voters to know the dangers of vote buying to the democratic process. I want to say good to have you both on Newsday. Now, I want to start it off, Mr. Itodo, and let's take you up on this particular issue of vote buying. A lot of people have been postulating theories on how to quell vote buying, but some of the off-season elections we've seen this rate ugly head, and it looking like this might manifest itself in a great deal come 2023 when we go for the general elections. Talk to us. What do you think can be done to ensure that it is minimized to the barest minimum?
Well, thank you. I think what's important is to underscore the place of vote buying within our electoral jurisprudence. That vote buying is an electoral offense and it's a criminal offense. Any attempt by political actors to subvert or influence voting choices of voters on election day through whether you call it voter enticement or vote buying is indeed an offense within our legal framework. And where there is an offense, there is a sanction. And so if there are sanctions and people have been arrested and people have been involved in this practice, then the law needs to take its full course. So one way to address this issue is accountability. There are people who have been arrested in the elections that you referenced, and what's happened to those people. The second point, from a policy perspective, the guidelines and the law is very clear as to the secrecy of the ballot. And once secrecy is compromised, it undermines electoral integrity. Because when electoral outcomes are defined by pecuniary or financial gains, the legitimacy of those outcomes are actually called to question. And so it is important that INEC as an institution continually protects the secrecy of the ballot. The reconfiguration of the polling unit is one attempt, to protect the secrecy of the ballot, but it needs to go beyond reconfiguring the polling unit. It needs to go to the extent where if polling officials observe vote buying in their polling units, they should call on the security agencies to take action. We know, based on our observation of elections, there are cases where the electoral or polling officials draw the attention of security agencies and they tend to look the other way. And we hope that as we build towards the election, that both the police and the security agencies involved in election security operations and INEC will take action against this, and particularly at the polling unit. Few days ago, INEC hosted this meeting on vote buying. You have anti-corruption institutions who were present. We're glad to see that there are policy actions being taken, but that needs to manifest even in the build-up to the election because they're already buying the votes. What happens before the day of election is called voter enticement or voter inducement. And these things are happening. There are reports that actually show they are happening. What are the accountability institutions like ICPC and EFCC doing to prevail in this situation? When this policy of the central bank limiting, amount of withdrawals, was introduced, we were all happy that it will limit liquidity and access to capital for political actors to buy votes on election day. But again, there have been pressure on the central bank, and now they have reviewed, the limits. We're just going to box ourselves in a situation where the politicians will continue this trend of buying votes, because they're already doing so now.
Well, very well said, Samson. I'm going to go to Uma. Now, Uma, some analysts believe that the challenge that needs to be tackled is actually vote selling rather than vote buying. So how can we convince Nigerians not to sell their votes in the face of the severe economic hardship in the country and the growing inflation that we're witnessing in Nigeria at the moment?
Okay, thank you for having me. We have an example from Anambra November 6, 2021 election, when the citizens rejected refused to sell their votes because they determined to ensure that they vote their candidate and ensure their candidate wins. So all we need to do is to actually tell the voters that this election year 2023 is very critical, and it has so many determinants that can ensure or make our democracy and our cities and our cooperative existence. And if you want to sell your vote, you should first of all calculate how much protection of lives and security and welfare and properties, what it is worth, how education for your wards or children, healthcare service delivery, good road network, having water and sanitation, what is what. So if you can calculate and evaluate what is going to cost you to provide this for the next 4 years, and if you can equate it and get the right price, then you can sell your vote. In a situation you are selling your vote even before the elections, 5,000, 7,000, 10,000 that cannot pay for anything. It's not the right way to go. I think we need education, because from our experiences, both policies of INEC and the security people have not worked, because both the security people and INEC personnel have collaborated to buy votes in the previous elections. So what is the guarantee? And even the people arrested, even as close as June Ekiti election, nobody has prosecuted them, because when nobody is prosecuted and they punished accordingly, the people are emboldened to sell and buy votes. So we have seen that it has not worked. We have to take the matter to the citizen that you cannot sell your vote, because when you sell your vote, you are selling your future. And many people are becoming very aware and conscious of what is going on. So we need to do voter education, and INEC needs to do more, and civil society, we need to do more, because when we do more, the people listen to us, they believe us, they know that we are saying the right things, and we are actually the ones telling them what is happening and what is. Everybody is complaining that things are bad. So if you say your vote for 10,000, that's the maximum I've seen in the field. They cannot make things better. What can make things better is for you to go and vote for your choice. Even if you make mistake, you can live with the consequences, knowing that you voted for your choice and the outcome of the election reflected that choice. So the people should collect their BVC, vote for their choice that they believe that can make things better for us in the country, and also defend this vote and ensure that whom they voted for or what they voted for, their choices were reflected in the outcome of the election, not just voting. They have to defend the votes, because so many things are happening. People are already correcting their V numbers and buying their vote, paying money to their accounts. So they need to come out and vote and defend the vote. In the case of Osun, where people voted and defended their votes. So we need to show the people that 10,000 cannot buy security of lives and property, and cannot provide welfare. It cannot provide education. It cannot provide better healthcare service delivery. It cannot provide good road network. If they cannot provide, then what can provide is what we should vote for and actually defend that our votes. And we must correct our PVCs, because people are just sitting at home. When we want to complain, if you want to complain, the best way to complain is go and correct your PVC, vote and defend your vote, and ensure that your choices reflected the outcome of the election. That's what we are going to do. Because we have seen the INEC, except in Osun year 2018, when INEC came out with a policy, if you buy vote, you will be shoot aside. And people were actually afraid. But that did not stop them. It's just that they sold their vote in a coded form. That for you to see them buying and voting on what happened in Ekiti on the 18th of June, year 2022, where people are brazenly selling and buying votes. So then they were afraid that something will happen. Can we ask EFCC, the people that arrested in Ekiti in June, what has happened to them? So we do not have so much confidence in the security agencies, which we have seen over and over again, that there are people who are collaborating to sell the votes. We have to take the education, and this is not the time to say a National Orientation Agency, because we know that they don't have the resources. We have been shouting National Orientation Agencies, all of us, including the media, the civil society, the traditional ruling institutions, the church, because in the registration of voters, the churches went to INEC offices, collected the beavers machine to their churches and call members to come and register. The church should come out and do the same, asking people to go and pick their votes and not to say their votes. The traditional ruling institutions should also go in, enter, and also our influencers should come in and say, no, everybody has to be part of this education. Media, civil society, the church, the traditional ruling institution, the influencers, we should join hands to do this education. That's where I think lies the solution.
All right, Solomon, let me come to you and actually pick it up from some points Uma mentioned concerning INEC and the role they play. I want to ask a two-pronged question. First of all, is the electoral body like the proverbial bulldog that can only bark and not bite? And talk to us about the laws. Are the laws stringent enough to deter people from vote buying? And enforcement, how do we enforce it to ensure that we get maximum output from these laws? Talk to us about this.
Well, if you look at this from a regulatory perspective, the law talks about bribery and conspiracy. The law also talks about quid pro quo. You sell your votes for money. The law talks about being in possession of PVCs that do not belong to you, and in this case, voter's card. The law has these expansive provisions. But the law now vests powers on INEC to prosecute. But the biggest issue with enforcement is if you look at the entire ecosystem, or let's say the value chain of vote buying, from the political actors to the method and mode of the transfers, and then also to the field officers, and then to the point where even the person who is selling their votes would also need to provide evidence of transaction that they have collected, that they have voted in a particular manner. If you look at this entire value chain, there are components of it where INEC has regulatory powers over. The first, if you talk about the configuration of the polling unit, yes, INEC has the power, to reconfigure polling units. But if you look at the three pillars of electoral offenses prosecution, arrest, investigation, and prosecution, INEC does not have the capacity for arrest. It doesn't have the capacity for investigation. These two responsibilities fall within the purview of our security agencies, and in this case, the police. The bigger question is, how come the police, having arrested people, having prosecuted or having investigated, what's the level of prosecution? The other bit is you have, the EFCC and the ICPC who also deploy men to the field on election day. And we saw the viral video in the Osun or in the Ekiti elections, where the EFCC in a stint operation arrested people with monies who were buying votes. That particular matter went to the court. They were going to prosecute those people. But of course, we also learned about the external pressure, the political pressure to interfere, with the prosecution of those individuals. This is why, we've always advocated that this power vested on the Attorney General of the Federation or the state to enter nolle in criminal cases needs to be vacated. They need to divest that power from the Attorney General or the Attorney General of the Federation or the Attorney General of the state. So you strip them of the power where they interfere with criminal cases. Because we have seen cases where Attorney Generals of the state, enter nolle that stops the prosecution of electoral offenders. And this is the context for which we operate. INEC has power, but its powers are limited, and so that's why you need an Electoral Offences Commission that also has some independent powers to prosecute. But within our current configuration, I think the security agencies have a critical role to play. The anti-corruption agencies also have a critical role to play. But then, what preventive steps can be taken between now and the elections to prevent politicians, from, buying votes? And we've talked about, what INEC can do, what the security agencies can do, but the financial institutions, because sometimes they are also complicit. And this is where banks like CBN and other private banks also have a role to play. I'm quite happy to see or hear that the federal government, it's intending to put a stop or a ban on withdrawals from the coffers of the federal government. But whilst we wait for that, the bigger question is, what's the level of liquidity and capital or resources that politicians have now? Which is why we can't talk about this discussion without situating it within the current policy of the CBN to limit transfers or to limit withdrawals. And all this, we believe, would have helped sanitize the process. So all the politicians who have stashed resources or stashed money will return the money back to the financial system. So to your question, there are powers that INEC has, but those powers are limited. If the agencies, the security agencies, perform their function, we will address this particular menace that seem to have gained currency in our elections.
Let me just follow up on what Samson said. How much impact do you expect the currency redesign and the limit on cash withdrawals to have on the elections? Do you think this will actually serve as a deterrent, to politicians and political parties against vote buying? Very briefly, please.
To me.
Uma, I don't know if you can hear me. I just want to know how much impact you expect the currency redesign.
Okay.
How much impact do you expect the currency redesign and the limit on cash withdrawal to have on the election? Will it serve as a deterrent to politicians and political parties?
We were rejoicing that it will serve, but we heard that there has been a reversal by the CBN, increasing the limits people can withdraw. And also, we know for sure that between now and the 7th of January, when the policy will take effect, that the people who will buy the votes would have withdrawn enough money to buy their votes. I think we need to take drastic measures against vote buying because it compromises the elections and electoral process. They're already buying the votes. So INEC is actually shouting. And INEC in the issue of prosecution is overwhelmed. Everything is on the shoulder of INEC. That's why we are asking from various reports where we've been asking since year 2007 to have a different commission that will be prosecuting and trying and punishing electoral offenders. But for now that we have only 2 months and 3 days to presidential election, what we can do is to ensure, because we know for sure in this country that there are big guys that already have these new means that the small people cannot even cite in the banks. So I know that it will serve as a deterrent for who? For the small people. But for big people, they will also withdraw the money before the 7th of January. We need to also come up with a stringent punishment for the bank managers that will go against this law, because they are the people, the financial institutions that will actually violate these laws before elections.
Thank you very much. We want to say thank you for joining us here on Newsday.